Ever find yourself scrolling online and wondering why these simple stories about good versus evil rack up millions and millions of views? Well, today we're diving headfirst into the world of modern digital fables. We're going to break down two animated stories from the super popular channel Cuckoo TV to figure out the powerful, timeless formula that makes them so compelling. Let's get right into it.
So, at the heart of our analysis, we have two kids from what seem like totally different worlds. On one side, there's Neha. Her dad's a rich businessman, so you'd think she's got it made, right? Protected by all that wealth? And on the other side, there's Chiku, a poor orphan who's living at the mercy of his relatives. But here's the thing. As we're about to see, money is no shield against cruelty. Both of these kids end up in a really similar, vulnerable spot, trapped by the very people who are supposed to be taking care of them.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start off by talking about what exactly a modern moral tale is. Then, we'll meet our two trapped children and the villains of their stories. After that, we'll analyze two very different paths to rescue. One is built on a super clever plot, and the other on just pure kindness. We'll see how justice gets served in the end, and finally, we'll break down why these stories are just so irresistible.
First up, modern moral tales. You know, in an age of really complex, nuanced TV shows and movies, it's kind of fascinating that these classic fables, with clear heroes, obvious bad guys, and simple moral lessons are just exploding on platforms like YouTube. It really feels like these stories tap into a basic human need for clarity and justice in a world that, let's be honest, often feels pretty chaotic.
And that brings us right to our two kids. This is where the conflict really kicks off. Both stories waste no time at all. They immediately set up a state of suffering and introduce us to the villains who are making our young heroes' lives an absolute misery.
For Neha, the trouble starts when her loving dad, Alok, says he has to go out of the country for a month on business. And he puts his complete and total trust in his new wife, Ranjana, asking her to look after Neha. This one act, this misplaced trust, is the trigger that sets the entire story in motion.
Chiku's situation, though, isn't some new development. It's his heartbreaking daily reality. He's an orphan living with his aunt and uncle, and they only care about the inheritance he'll get someday. So he's sent to school in dirty clothes and has to eat stale leftovers. The cruelty is just this constant grinding part of his life.
And bam! The second Neha's dad is out the door, Ranjana's friendly mask just drops. This one quote captures it all. Her sudden, shocking switch from a loving wife to a cruel, menacing stepmother. The threat is real, it's immediate, and it turns Neha's home into a prison overnight.
And here, you just feel the casual cruelty of Chiku's aunt. He just asks for some fresh food for his lunch, and she snaps back with this. It's a line that tells you everything you need to know about her character. She doesn't see taking care of him as her duty, she sees it as a burden, and she absolutely resents it.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. How these two kids get saved. This brings us to plot versus kindness. We're going to compare two totally different kinds of rescue missions. One is this calculated, planned-out scheme, while the other is just a beautiful, spontaneous wave of human compassion.
So here's the key difference. Neha is saved by a plot, a really smart plan her dad put into motion before the abuse even started. But Chico? He's saved by kindness, a series of totally unplanned, organic acts of compassion from complete strangers who just happened to see him suffering and decided they had to do something.
So let's break down Alok's plan, because it's pretty brilliant. First, he announces a fake business trip. Second, before he leaves, he gets Ranjana to sign what she thinks is just a school form for Neha, but it's actually a document that gives up all her rights to his property. And third, the masterstroke. He never actually leaves the country. He stays behind in disguise to watch her reveal her true, cruel nature. It's a perfect trap. Chiku's rescue, though, is a whole different ballgame. It's not one person with one big plan. It's this beautiful chain reaction of kindness. And just like in all the best fairy tales, there's a magic number at the heart of it all: 3. We're about to meet 3 strangers who are going to completely change his life.
So, the first act of kindness comes from Rajkumari, a poor woman who sees Chiku crying because of his stale lunch. Without a second thought, she gives him her own fresh food and tells him, "I'll be your stepmother." It's such a simple, powerful act that meets his most basic need: hunger. And the kindness just keeps rolling. Next, Chiku is found crying again, this time because he's afraid he'll get in trouble for his dirty school uniform. That's when Rajkumari's sister, Rajni, steps in. She offers to wash his clothes for him every single day, giving him back his dignity.
And finally, the third sister, Renu, hears Chiku worrying about his scuffed-up shoes. Well, it turns out her father is a shoe polisher, and she immediately arranges for his shoes to get shined every single day. Just like that, in 3 simple steps, these 3 women turn Chiku's daily misery into a life where he's actually cared for.
All right, our heroes have been saved. Now it's time for the villains to get what's coming to them. We're on to Section 4. Justice is served. This is the moment we've all been waiting for, where the bad guys finally have to face the music.
In Neha's story, the climax is this amazing verbal takedown. Alok comes back from his fake trip and lays the whole scheme bare. He tells Ranjana that her own greed was her undoing. That piece of paper she signed has left her with absolutely nothing. Justice is swift and it's so poetic.
Chiku's rescue is way more dramatic. When his aunt finds out he's been happy and well cared for, she flies into a rage and locks him in the house. But his 3 stepmothers notice he's missing. They band together and they show up with the police. They expose all the abuse, and the aunt and uncle get arrested right there on the spot. It's community action leading to real legal justice.
Let's just take a look at the final accounting here. It really lays out how perfectly symmetrical the justice is in these stories. For Ranjana, whose big sin was greed and cruelty, her punishment is purely financial. She's left with nothing. For the aunt and uncle, whose sin was greed plus neglect, their consequence is legal. They're arrested. In both cases, the punishment fits the crime perfectly. It's just so satisfying.
So, what is it that makes these simple little animations so incredibly powerful? Well, that brings us to our final section, why these stories work. Let's deconstruct the core formula that makes these fables so effective and, frankly, so emotionally satisfying to watch.
The formula is actually pretty simple, but it is so potent. You start with a vulnerable hero that we immediately want to protect. You put them up against a villain who has 0 redeeming qualities. They're just pure evil. You engineer a dramatic rescue, either through a clever plot twist or this overwhelming wave of kindness, and you deliver a conclusion that is just so morally satisfying, where justice isn't just served, it is swift, it's absolute, and it's perfectly tailored to the villain's crimes.
And that really leaves us with one last big question. You know, our world, our real lives are filled with complexity, with nuance, with all sorts of moral gray areas. So could the massive popularity of these digital fables be a sign that we have this deep, maybe even primal, need for simple stories? Stories where good is good, evil gets punished, and the world, even if just for a few minutes, makes perfect, simple, moral sense. It's definitely something to think about.